The vaccine advertising, we've seen the ads roll out in Sydney, quite a graphic advertisement, a woman struggling to breathe on a ventilator. What do you say to criticism that that's simply too graphic?
Well, there's always criticism of any advertising, I know that. And it was only a few weeks ago that our very critics were saying that the advertising needed to be stronger, far stronger, even making references to Grim Reapers. So, look, there'll always be lots of opinions on these things. But what's important is we need people to understand how critical it is that they follow the advice that is here in New South Wales now. We were having major problems with compliance here in New South Wales. I think we've made a big step forward on that over about the last 4 or so days. And we're really seeing those mobility levels now plummeting in New South Wales, which means people are getting the message and staying at home. There's two ways to protect yourself. Of course, to stay at home, and so you're keeping yourself, your family and your community safe. But secondly, of course, where you're eligible for that vaccine, then we encourage people, particularly elderly people, to go and get it because they are the most vulnerable. And as the Premier has said today, she has repeated effectively what I'd said a week or so ago, and that you should talk to your doctor about the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's an informed consent decision, and I would appreciate the support she's given for people going and doing just that.
There's been some criticism as well from younger Australians who see that young woman on the ventilator and say, well, we can't even get the preferred vaccine at the moment. It all goes back to supply. Is it unfair? Is it misleading in a way for that ad to have that young woman as the feature when a lot of people in that cohort can't get the jab?
Well, as I said, it has two messages. And one is that to stay at home. I mean, that we can't be complacent about this. And young people moving around the city was putting people at risk right across the community, including themselves. And so there's that message. But also, I mean, as I just indicated, and as the Premier already has today, about going and seeing your doctor and having that discussion about available vaccines. But of course, with the Pfizer vaccine, which we have been able to upscale and bring forward those vaccines to 1 million a week very, very shortly. And there's additional vaccines going into New South Wales right now, those 150 Pfizer, then that is obviously going to improve things as time goes on.
11 of the 52 people in hospital in New South Wales are under 35, 6 under 25. Was Dr Jeanette Young wrong when she told young Australians it's far too dangerous to get AstraZeneca?
Well, it doesn't accord with the TGA advice and the ATAGI advice. That's all I said. I said that people should talk to their doctor. And the TGA approval for AstraZeneca is for those age groups. And that the ATAGI advice said there was a preferred vaccine for those under 60, and that's why it's important that people talk to their doctor. I just basically restated what the ATAGI advice was. But equally, I know from talking directly to the then head of ATAGI, who made that decision about the over 50s originally, and the view was very clear from ATAGI that where the balance of risk changes, i.e. when you've got an outbreak like we're seeing in Sydney at the moment, because of the very low incidence of the cases that involve those complications and quite serious ones on very rare circumstances, that the balance of risk tips for having the vaccine. And that's why it's important that people have that discussion with their doctor.
If we'd treated the vaccination rollout as a race, would we still be having lockdowns like we're seeing now?
No. Those comments were made at a time when we were talking about the approval of those vaccines by the official bodies here in Australia, that we had low rates of COVID at the time, and the view was by Professor Brendan Murphy and many others that those agencies had to do their job, and we had to get the rollout occurring in the most effective way to target those in the older age groups. And so we were prioritising where those vaccines in the early phases needed to go. Those comments were made back in March, and Kieran, I mean, clearly the situation has changed since that time, and that's why we've been ramping things up. We are now hitting almost 1 million vaccine doses a week, and at no stage was there ever envisaged, under any plan or scenario, that Australia would have been in a position right now where we would have had a critical mass of vaccinations in the community? And in fact, the only country I'm aware of in the world today that has a vaccination rate of higher than 65% is Israel. So the suggestion that Australia wasn't going to be in a suppression phase at this point of the year is just simply not correct. And I think those sorts of comments and the criticisms that have been directed towards us on that tend to have a bit of a political overlay.
When you look back, though, in hindsight, would you have acquired more Pfizer jabs? If we look back to December, say, when the UQ-CSL vaccine fell over, the government had ordered an extra 31 jabs, 20 million AstraZeneca, 11 million Novavax, no Pfizer. At the time, if you could take yourself back to that point, would you have stepped up the acquisition of Pfizer then?
Well, I don't have that opportunity. And no one could have known at that time, Kieran, and that's the point. So what we did was, as soon as we had those issues, we increased our contracted doses from 10 to 20 million Pfizer. And that was done very quickly. I remember it when Greg Hunt was able to secure that. And then when we had the challenges with the ATAGI advice, we got it doubled very quickly from 20 million to 40 million. And now, most recently, after some great work done by Greg Hunt and Brendan Murphy, we've been able to bring forward those doses so we can escalate the level of vaccinations we're getting this month. We keep going at the rate we're at now, we will reach where we want to get to by the end of the year. And as I said earlier last week, that would put us about 2 months out from where we were and hope to be earlier in this year. And so we've been doing a lot of catch-up over the recent months. There's been serious challenges, I don't deny that. But you can't dwell on those challenges. You overcome them as we have. I appointed Lieutenant General Fruin to bring all of that effort together, and I think he's made a great job of that. And things are really starting to escalate where people I know would like them to get to.
Did Kevin Rudd's intervention help in any way?
Well, I can only go by what Pfizer said, and Pfizer have issued a statement. I mean, look, I welcome the support from anyone who wants to assist with these things, and that's fine. But ultimately, as Pfizer has made very clear, I mean, this is a contractual relationship between the federal government, the Commonwealth government, and Pfizer. It's been a very positive relationship. I'm very appreciative of the way that Pfizer has been able to respond to all of our requests, whether it was going from 10 to 20 million or 20 to 40 million or bringing these forward. That is the work that is being done each and every day, not one conversation, each and every day by all of our officials and government ministers and others who are supporting ensuring we get things as soon as we possibly can. So welcome any support and appreciate that.
Did you speak to the head of Pfizer?
Based on what Pfizer said, I don't think it... Sorry? I've spoken to the head of Pfizer here in Australia, which is where the contract is, and that's how it's managed on numerous occasions. In fact, while I was in Europe, I had the opportunity to also sit down one of their senior board directors. So we've been managing that relationship at a very senior level.